All right. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to say call Halayim Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai Bahashim Rakah Quitash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who have taught me this truth and who rule well in this truth. Shalom to the 144,000 and the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel that is scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Peace and mercy unto you. You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. You are the true Hebrew Israelites that the Bible speaks of. You are the true chosen people of the book. All right, so as you see this video that I have here on screen, right, this is a video of what you see in the sky. All right, these are chemtrails. All right, these are chemtrails. All right, these aren't regular contrails that are made by planes. These are chemtrails. Anyone that knows about chemtrails or know what they look like, all right, know that these are chemtrails, man. All right, and you can also tell by the formation of them. They always look like that. All right, they're just chilling and sitting in the sky. All right, and in those chemtrails is many different chemicals. All right, now this is all orchestrated by the elites, man. All right, because the elites have an agenda, right, to bring forth the new world order. All right, so what they do is poison the sky, right, so that we can breathe in chemicals, and these chemicals land on the crops and all of that. Because what this does to the people, all right, it keeps them in a zombie-like state mind, right? It keeps them docile and retarded, all right? Lazy and stuff like that. It lowers the energy of the people, all right, to keep them calm, all right? Because and it's also part of the depopulation process. All right, because that's part of the agenda of the New World Order, to depopulate the masses, because the less people there are, the easier it is to control the masses. All right, that's all part of the New World Order agenda. All right, and these different chemicals, it keeps the people stupid and retarded and slow. All right, because that's exactly what they want. All right, to be able to control the people this way. All right, now what I want to go into is a book. All right, called, as you see right here, it's called Population Control, all right, by Jim Marrs. All right, and I've gone into this book many times, right, and done many lessons on it. All right, it's called Population Control by Jim Marrs, and it goes into all the ways that Esau Edom goes about to depopulate the masses. All right, it goes into the GMOs, all right, the poisoning of the water supply, the food supply. It goes into the chemtrails. It goes into all of that. All right, and I did a video and a lesson on the chemtrails before, but I see this video, I want to do it again. All right, because people may have not seen that video, right? So as you see right here, it says chemtrails, and this is chapter 14. The title of chapter 14 is called what? Let's read it. All right, chapter 14, deadly air. Deadly air. All right, and then you go down. All right, it goes into the chemtrails. All right, well, the beginning of the chapter, all right, let's get it. Beginning of the chapter, goes into the radiation, right? Then it goes into microwave energy, right? Then chemtrails. All right, so let's get into the chemtrail part. All right, hopefully you could read this, but if not, I'm reading it for you. All right, or you could zoom in on the video, right? So it says, let's read it. It says, a few years back, a retired intelligence officer was visiting a friend still in the military and stationed at the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico when a high-flying jet flew across the sky, leaving a white trail in its wake. During the conversation, the serviceman boasted about the security at White Sands, stating that no aircraft were allowed to fly over its restricted airspace. The former intelligence officer pointed to the craft above them and asked, "What about that airplane?" After looking directly at the jet above them, the serviceman replied with a smirk, "What plane?" All right. This anecdote illustrates the problem of the aerial phenomena that have come to be known as chemtrails. Right? It says, like the servicemen under orders not to admit to overflights, no one in a position of authority will admit that chemtrails exist, much less who is responsible for them and what purpose they serve. But unlike many modern mysteries, this one is visible to anyone who cares to look up the days that large, high-flying jets weave narrow and continuous vapor chemical trails through the sky. Despite dismissive articles calling chemtrails merely a new quote-unquote conspiracy theory, and citizens in denial that something so obvious might not be reported in the mainstream media, a growing number of serious researchers have studied the phenomenon. All right? Let's continue to read. All right? It says, for more than a decade, first the United States, then Canada's citizens have been subjected to a 24/7, 365-day aerosol assault over our heads, made of a toxic brew of poisonous heavy metals, chemicals, and other dangerous ingredients. None of this was reported by any mainstream media. Noted the late environmental activist and former college professor, Dr. Aya, all right, Sandra Lingerie, all right. The U.S. Department of Defense and military have been systematically blanketing all our skies with what are known as chemtrails, also known as stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. These differ vastly from the usual plain contrails that evaporate rather quickly in the sky. Chemtrails are nothing new. The U.S. military, in what have been described as vulnerability tests, has sprayed chemical and biological compounds in open air testing over civilian populations since the late 1940s. Just one example was the dumping of thousands of pounds of zinc cadmium sulfide during nearly 300 secret experiments between 1952 and 1969. Targets of this contamination include Fort Wayne, Indiana, St. Louis, San Francisco, and Corpus Christi, Oceanside, California, and even Minnesota's Chippewa National Forest. All right, beginning around 1997, observant people around the world starting noticing the long trails in the skies that fail to evaporate like the condensation trails from normal aircraft. Condensation trails, or contrails, have been a fixture in the sky since World War II, when high altitude bombers would leave a trail of condensation behind them. Any aircraft engine, jet, or piston produces warm, moist air, which, when injected into the cold, dry air of the upper atmosphere, results in a trail of water vapor or ice crystals that stream out behind the craft. Once these particles return to a cooler state, they evaporate back into the air. This evaporation can take place within 10 seconds or stretch for more than an hour depending on temperature and humidity in the atmosphere. Since contrails primarily contain water, they present no real hazard to the population. Contrails do not normally occur below about 30,000 feet. Chemtrails are entirely different. All right, these trails do not evaporate but spread out and eventually form a cloud haze over the entire sky. As World War II veteran David Oglesby noted, after observing chemtrails in the sky above his California home, the trails form a grid pattern. All right, is that not what we seen in that video that I showed you at the beginning? A grid pattern. Okay, rewind this video back to the beginning. You're gonna see that, a formation of a grid pattern. All right, it says, where was I at? All right, these trails form a grid pattern. Some stretch from the horizon to horizon. Some began abruptly and others ended abruptly. They hung in the air for an extended period of time and gradually widened into wispy clouds resembling spider webs. That's exactly what you seen in that video that I showed you in the beginning. All right, it says I counted at least 11 different trails. The official debunking line that all observed trails in the sky are simply condensation trails fall apart when chemtrails are seen simultaneously in the same portion of the sky and at approximately the same altitude. Keen observers have noticed two planes of similar size laying trails at the same altitude and at the same time, yet they are not the same. One in short, while the other reaches to the horizon. Others ask, how can it be that one day there are numerous trails crisscrossing each other in the sky, but on the next day, with no change in the climate, there are no trails in the sky? You see? Did all aircraft suddenly stop flying? All right, it says even more damning, chemtrails often occur at altitudes and conditions that would make it impossible for normal contrails to form. Furthermore, contrails are composed of water vapor, all right, whitish in color and produce no halo effect in the sunlight. Chemtrails, on the other hand, appear oily and produce rainbow effects. Woo! All right, especially in the late afternoon sun. Contrails cannot be stopped without shutting off an aircraft's engine, but chemtrails have been observed coming to an end. Even the aircraft producing them flies onward. Aircraft do not shut off their engines mid-flight. All right. Let's continue reading. It says, Ohio Representative Dennis Kucinich, all right, who served as chairman, all right, of the subcommittee of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, once introduced his unsuccessful Space Preservation Age Act of 2001, HR 2977, designed to ban the deployment of exotic weapons in space. Listed in this legislation were chemical, biological, environmental, climate changing, and tectonic weapons, and notably chemtrails. In 2004, while campaigning as a presidential candidate, Kucinich, all right, responded to a question about chemtrails by flatly stating chemtrails are real. Bob Fitrakis of Columbus Alive asked Kucinich, all right, why he would introduce a bill banning so-called chemtrails when the U.S. government routinely denies their existence and the U.S. Air Force routinely calls chemtrail sightings hoaxes. All right. Kucinich replied, the truth is there is an entire program in the Department of Defense Vision
for 2020, quote unquote, that developing these weapons, all right, that's developing these weapons, all right, in an apparent effort to conceal classified weapon systems, the more exotic weapons, including chemtrails, were later stricken from the failed bill. All right, government aided by a compliant corporate mass media predisposed to blindly accept official pronouncements as gospel continues to skirt the issue. All right, no ambitious reporter wants to sidetrack their career by digging into a morass of official denials on chemtrails. Even many politicians appear to be in the dark, having been given the official runaround when it comes to chemtrails. All right, you know, they be given scripts and all of that, man. All right, after describing condensation vapor trails and attributing chemtrail sightings to ever increasing air traffic, Air Force Colonial Walter M. Washabo, all right, testified in Congress that chemtrails are a hoax. He stated the Air Force's policy is to observe and forecast the weather to support military operations. The Air Force is not conducting any weather modifications, experiments or programs, and has no plans to do so in the future. In short, there is no such thing as chemtrails. The actual contrails are safe and are a natural phenomenon. And of course they're gonna say all that, man. All right, to cover up everything, man. All right, because they're bought and paid for by the elite banking families. All right, because they're the one that they're puppets. All right, and pawns for the elite bankers. All right, because it all starts with them. All right, with the elite bankers. All right, because this is their agenda, and they use the lesser luminaries, man, as puppets to carry out their agenda. All right, I'm gonna read a little more. All right, it says they pose no health hazard of any kind. A Houston, Texas study found that over the course of 63 days of observation, military aircraft laid down white plumes that lasted for 8 hours or more, while commercial airliners flying at the same altitude left contrails that lasted no longer than 25 seconds. Stranger still were observations of aircraft not filling flight plans, and hence not recorded by the FAA, all right, or shown in the flight software. It was discovered that the jets that were responsible for leaving highly persistent trails that lasted for hours did not even appear on Flight Explorer, the report stated. Woo, all right. It says, so how are chemtrails harming us? In the late 1990s and early 2000s, people and even some local TV stations began to report strange white sticky substance being found on homes, yards, and vehicles. It was lace-like and hung from trees and shrubbery as it had fallen from the sky. Chemical analysis found this substance contained aluminum oxide, barium polymers, and even traces of pathogens. People in the vicinity of this substance reported ill effects such as asthma, fatigue, headaches, dizziness, joint pain, and flu-like symptoms. You see? Come on, man. All right. This is beautiful information. It says the chemtrail formula was apparently improved as the number of reports of webby material has declined in recent years. Because no one in a position of authority will admit what is happening right in front of the public's eyes, researchers have been forced to speculate on what chemtrails are about. And we know what chemtrails are about, man. All right, the ones that are in the know. All right, the scriptures say we are not ignorant of Satan's devices. We know what's going on, man. The true prophets and the true servants of the Lord. All right, the Israelites of Great Millstone and the ones that teach in like manner. You know? So I'll read a little bit more. All right. It says one theory is that the citizenry is being exposed to chemical spraying as a covert means of inoculation, although germ warfare experts and medical authorities agree that a high altitude spraying program is an inefficient method for distributing bacteria and viruses, which is bullshit. All right. Likewise, there seems to be a little evidence that chemtrails are specifically designed to call the human population, as was believed by many in the early days of the spraying, and that's exactly what it is for. All right, to call the population, man, to cut in half the population, to kill the population. That's what it's for, man. Depopulation control. All right. Many pathogens have been found in the upper atmosphere, which is an indication that illnesses brought on by chemtrails may not be an intentional part of the program. All right. Nevertheless, they may be inadvertently, all right, brought to Earth by the chemtrail haze. This undoubtedly is a small consolation to those who suffer from such contamination. It indicates an indifference to public harm on the part of those responsible for the spraying. All right. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll continue and make different parts. All right. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. All right. Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai Ratazah, this lesson is edifying. All right. So with that being said, until the next one, Shalom, Shalom.